Barron Trump walks into a restaurant. Chef refuses to serve him. What happened next will leave you speechless. The aroma of freshly baked bread and seared meats filled the air at La Magnifique, a renowned French restaurant nestled in the heart of Manhattan. The dim glow of crystal chandeliers reflected off polished silverware as the soft murmur of elite diners created an ambience of exclusivity. Tonight, like every other evening, the restaurant was packed with the city's finest, celebrities, business moguls, and political figures, all drawn by the culinary genius of Chef Salvatore. Salvatore was in his element, orchestrating the kitchen with precision. His commands were swift, his hands steady, and his mind focused on maintaining the reputation he had built over decades. For him, every dish was a masterpiece, every plate an extension of his soul. But tonight, the delicate balance of his world was about to be shaken. "Chef," whispered Maria, his sous chef, rushing to his side with wide eyes. "You won't believe this." Barron Trump just walked in. Salvatore froze mid-motion, his hand hovering over a pot of simmering sauce. A name he had not expected to hear, one that carried weight and stirred emotions he had long tried to bury. He turned slowly, his face unreadable. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria nodded, glancing nervously toward the dining room. "It's him. He's at table 5 with a small entourage. Should we?" "No," Salvatore interrupted, his tone sharp. "I won't serve him." The kitchen fell silent, a heavy pause hanging in the air as the staff exchanged stunned glances. Maria leaned closer, her voice low but urgent. "Chef, he's just a teenager. What's the problem?" "It's not about him," Salvatore said, his eyes hardening. "It's about what his family represents." In the dining room, Barron Trump sat quietly, scrolling through his phone. Despite the murmurs and stolen glances from other patrons, he appeared composed, detached even. His tall frame and calm demeanor drew attention, but his focus remained on the menu in front of him. The tension in the kitchen grew palpable as whispers of Salvatore's decision spread among the staff. "He's refusing to serve Barron Trump?" Marco, the pastry chef, hissed. "Is he out of his mind? This could ruin us." Salvatore ignored the murmurs, gripping the edge of the counter tightly. His mind was a storm of memories, flashes of a protest, the chaos, and a moment that had forever altered his life. His knuckles whitened as he clenched his fists. Meanwhile, the maitre d' approached Barron's table, his face taut with anxiety. "Mr. Trump," he began cautiously, "there seems to be a delay with your service. I apologize for the inconvenience." Barron looked up, his expression calm but curious. "Is there a problem?" "No, sir. We're just sorting out a small issue," the maitre d' stammered before retreating quickly. In the kitchen, Maria confronted Salvatore again. "Chef, you can't let this escalate. People are already noticing." Salvatore turned to her, his voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "Maria, do you remember the Capitol protest 3 years ago?" Maria blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, but what is that?" "I lost my son that day," Salvatore said, his voice breaking. "Wrong place, wrong time. He was caught in the chaos. And every time I see that family's name, I see him." The room fell silent, the weight of Salvatore's grief settling heavily over the staff. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Maria placed a hand on Salvatore's shoulder, her voice gentle but firm. "This isn't about them. It's about you. Are you sure this is what Luca would have wanted?" Salvatore's chest tightened at the mention of his son's name, but he couldn't answer. In the dining room, the tension had reached a boiling point. Guests whispered furiously, speculating about the delay, while others discreetly recorded the unfolding drama. Barron noticed the stares but remained composed, his fingers lightly drumming the table. Then, to the shock of everyone, Barron stood. At nearly 6 feet 5 inches, his presence was commanding, and the room fell silent as he made his way toward the kitchen. As he entered, the hum of activity ceased. Salvatore turned to face him, his heart pounding. Barron's calm blue eyes met Salvatore's, and for a moment, the two stood in silence, the weight of the situation hanging heavily between them. "Chef," Barron said, his voice steady but polite. "I understand you don't want to serve me. May I ask why?" Salvatore hesitated, his emotions warring within him. Behind him, the staff held their breath, waiting for his response. "It's not personal," Salvatore said finally, his voice tight. "But I can't." Barron's brow furrowed, his calm demeanor faltering for the first time. "If I've offended you, I'm sorry. But I don't understand." Salvatore's hands trembled as he clenched the counter for support. "It's about your family. About the pain they remind me of." For the first time, Barron's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. "But holding on to that pain won't bring him back." Salvatore's breath caught. The words struck deeper than he expected, shaking the walls he had built around his grief. The air in the kitchen felt charged, every eye on the two figures standing inches apart. The hum of the dining room beyond felt distant, the moment charged with raw emotion. Salvatore's voice cracked as he whispered, "You don't understand." "Maybe not," Barron replied. "But I'd like to." The cliffhanger hung heavily in the air, leaving everyone to wonder. Would Salvatore confront his grief, or would the weight of his pain prove too much to bear? What do you think Salvatore should do? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know if forgiveness is always the right choice. Don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter of this unfolding story. Salvatore's hands gripped the counter as Barron's words echoed in his mind. The teenager's calm, yet firm tone had cut through the fog of Salvatore's emotions, leaving him momentarily speechless. Around him, the kitchen staff exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or let the conversation play out. "You don't understand," Salvatore repeated, though his voice was quieter now, less resolute. "Then explain it to me," Barron replied. "If I've done something to hurt you, I'd like to make it right." Salvatore's chest tightened, a lump forming in his throat. "It's not about you," he said finally, his voice trembling. "It's about your family. About what they represent to me." Barron tilted his head slightly, his expression thoughtful but unwavering. "What do they represent?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Salvatore hesitated, the memories crashing over him like a tidal wave. "Pain," he said at last, his voice breaking. "Loss." Behind him, Maria stepped forward cautiously. "Chef," she said softly, "maybe this isn't the time." "No," Salvatore interrupted, his voice suddenly firmer. "He asked, and he deserves an answer." Turning back to Barron, Salvatore's gaze softened, though the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. 3 years ago, during the Capitol protests, my son, he was there. He wasn't part of it. He was just passing through. But he got caught in the chaos, and he didn't make it home. The silence that followed was deafening. Barron's expression shifted, the calm composure replaced by a flicker of empathy. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. Salvatore nodded, his hands still trembling. "Every time I see your name, your family, it brings it all back. The grief, the anger, the guilt. I know it's not fair to blame you, but you need someone to blame," Barron finished gently. Salvatore's shoulders slumped, the weight of his emotions finally pressing him down. "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the kitchen was palpable, every staff member hanging on their every word. Barron broke the silence. "I don't know what it's like to lose someone like that," he said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "But I do know that holding on to anger doesn't heal the pain. It just makes it heavier." Salvatore's jaw tightened, his eyes misting. "You're just a kid," he said bitterly. "What could you possibly know about pain?" Barron's gaze didn't waver. "More than you might think," he said softly. The kitchen was silent again, the hum of the restaurant beyond feeling like a distant memory. Salvatore looked at Barron, searching for something, perhaps an answer, perhaps a reason to let go. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders sagging. "You're right," he said. "It's not your fault. It never was." Barron gave a small nod, his expression calm but understanding. "Thank you," he said simply. The moment felt like a release, the heavy tension in the air beginning to dissipate. Maria stepped forward, her voice hesitant but kind. "Chef, maybe it's time to serve him." Salvatore hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "Let's get back to work." The kitchen erupted into motion, the staff rushing to prepare Barron's meal as Salvatore stood by, his hands still trembling but his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. In the dining room, Barron returned to his table, his calm demeanor unshaken. Guests whispered furiously, speculating about what had happened behind the kitchen doors. As the meal was finally served, Salvatore himself stepped out of the kitchen, carrying the plate with trembling hands. He placed it in front of Barron, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm sorry for earlier," he said quietly. "And thank you." Barron looked up, his expression calm but kind. "Thank you for telling me," he replied. Salvatore returned to the kitchen, the weight on his shoulders lighter than it had been in years. For the first time since Luca's death, he felt a flicker of hope. Hope that forgiveness, both for others and for himself, was possible. What do you think about Salvatore's decision to open up? Do you believe forgiveness is the key to healing? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know how you would handle such a moment. Don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter of this moving story. The next morning, the aftermath of the previous evening's events began to unfold in ways no one could have anticipated. A guest had recorded a snippet of the interaction between Salvatore and Barron, and by dawn, the video had gone viral. The footage of Barron's composed demeanor, Salvatore's emotional admission, and the eventual reconciliation sparked a whirlwind of reactions online. The restaurant was inundated with calls and messages, ranging from words of encouragement to scathing criticism. Salvatore ignored most of it, focusing instead on his work. But the video had stirred something in him, an understanding that his pain was no longer just his burden to bear. As the day wore on, Salvatore received an unexpected visitor. Maria ushered a courier into the kitchen, handing him a small envelope addressed in elegant handwriting. "It's from Barron," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. Salvatore opened the envelope carefully, his hands trembling. Inside was a short note. *Chef Salvatore, thank you for sharing your story. Your courage reminded me that everyone carries a burden, and it's how we choose to face it that defines us. If there's ever a way I can help, please let me know. Barron Trump, Salvatore read the note twice, his eyes misting. For so long, he had carried his grief alone, letting it fester into anger and isolation. But Barron's words, so simple yet so profound, had struck a chord. Later that evening, Maria found Salvatore sitting alone in the restaurant's dimly lit dining room, the note still clutched in his hand. "Chef," she said softly, taking a seat across from him. "What are you thinking?" Salvatore sighed, his gaze distant. "For years, I've poured everything into this restaurant, trying to build something that Luca would have been proud of. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what really matters." Maria tilted her head, her expression gentle. "And what's that?" Salvatore looked at her, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "People. Connection. Giving back." The next morning, Salvatore gathered his staff for a meeting. The air in the room was tense, the events of the previous night still fresh in everyone's minds. "I've made a decision," Salvatore began, his voice firm but calm. "This restaurant has always been about exclusivity, about serving the elite. But I want to change that. From now on, La Magnifique will be a place where everyone feels welcome." The staff exchanged surprised glances, unsure of what he meant. Salvatore continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. "We're going to start hosting community dinners for families in need, for people who've fallen on hard times. I want this restaurant to be more than just a business. I want it to be a beacon of hope." For a moment, there was silence. Then Maria began to clap, her smile wide and genuine. One by one, the staff joined in, the room filling with applause. Word of Salvatore's decision spread quickly, and the response was overwhelming. Local businesses offered donations, volunteers stepped forward to help, and even former patrons who had once frequented the restaurant reached out to lend their support. Barron, upon hearing about Salvatore's plan, sent another letter. *Chef Salvatore, your decision is inspiring. Luca would be proud. If there's any way I can help make your vision a reality, please don't hesitate to ask. Barron Trump, Salvatore framed the letter and hung it in the restaurant, a reminder of the turning point that had led to this transformation. The first community dinner was a resounding success. Long tables replaced the private booths, and the dining room buzzed with the laughter and chatter of families and children who had never experienced a meal like this before. Salvatore greeted each guest personally, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. As he served a plate to a young boy, the child looked up at him with wide eyes and said, "Thank you, chef." Salvatore smiled, his throat tightening. "No," he said softly. "Thank you." In the weeks that followed, La Magnifique became a symbol of hope in the community. People traveled from all over to see the transformation, not for the exclusivity, but for the heart behind it. Salvatore renamed the restaurant Luca's Table, honoring his son's memory and the legacy he hoped to build. One evening, months later, Barron returned to the restaurant, not as a guest, but as a volunteer. He rolled up his sleeves, stepping into the kitchen alongside Salvatore. Together, they prepared meals, sharing stories and laughter that echoed through the room. When dinner was served, Barron joined the guests at the long tables, chatting with families and playing with children. For Salvatore, it felt like a full-circle moment, a reminder that even in the depths of pain, there is room for healing, connection, and second chances. As the evening came to a close, Salvatore and Barron stepped outside, the stars twinkling above them. "You've changed my life, Barron," Salvatore said quietly. Barron smiled, his gaze steady. "No, chef. You changed mine. You taught me that even in pain, there's room for kindness. Do you believe kindness can transform lives?" Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know how you've seen the power of forgiveness and second chances. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire and remind us of the best in humanity. Months after the transformation of Luca's Table, the restaurant had become a beacon of hope and community. Salvatore had embraced his role as not only a chef, but as a leader who brought people together. The once exclusive dining room was now filled with a mix of laughter, shared stories, and the aroma of meals prepared with love. The community dinners had grown in scale, attracting not only locals but also visitors from neighboring towns. Families who had never stepped into such a luxurious setting found themselves treated with dignity and care, thanks to Salvatore's vision and the support of his staff. The walls of the restaurant, once adorned with minimalistic artwork, were now filled with photographs of smiling guests, handwritten thank you notes, and drawings from children who had dined there. One evening, Salvatore received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was calm and measured. "Chef Salvatore, this is Barron Trump. I'd like to visit Luca's Table for your next community dinner. If it's all right, I'd also like to help in the kitchen." Salvatore's heart raced, a mix of surprise and gratitude. "Barron, of course. It would be an honor." When the evening of the dinner arrived, anticipation buzzed through the restaurant. Barron arrived dressed simply, a far cry from the polished image most associated with him. He greeted Salvatore with a warm handshake and a small smile. "Let's get to work," Barron said, rolling up his sleeves. Salvatore guided him into the kitchen, where the staff watched in awe as the young man dove into the preparations. He chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and even plated dishes, his demeanor calm and focused. "I want to earn my place here," Barron said, his tone humble. Throughout the evening, Barron worked alongside the staff, laughing and sharing stories. When dinner was served, he joined the guests at the long communal tables, chatting with families and playing with children. His presence brought an air of authenticity, and it was clear he wasn't there for attention. He was there to connect. At the end of the night, as the guests departed with full bellies and warm hearts, Salvatore and Barron sat together in the quiet kitchen. The hum of the restaurant had faded, replaced by a sense of peace. "You know," Salvatore began, his voice reflective, "when I first refused to serve you, I thought I was standing up for something. But I was wrong. You didn't deserve my anger. You deserve my understanding." Barron looked at him, his expression thoughtful. "And you deserve the chance to heal," he said softly. "Sometimes it just takes someone willing to listen." Salvatore nodded, his eyes misting. "Thank you for being that person." In the following months, Barron became a regular visitor to Luca's Table, often bringing donations or ideas for new community initiatives. Together, he and Salvatore created programs that extended beyond the restaurant, offering cooking classes for underprivileged youth and food drives for struggling families. The partnership between Salvatore and Barron inspired countless others. News outlets covered the story, emphasizing the transformative power of kindness and forgiveness. Letters poured in from across the country, many sharing personal stories of redemption and second chances. One evening, as Salvatore locked up the restaurant after a particularly lively community dinner, he paused to look at the framed photo of Luca on the wall. Next to it was Barron's handwritten note, now a symbol of the journey they had shared. With a deep breath, Salvatore smiled. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace, not just for himself, but for the legacy he was building. What lessons can we learn from Salvatore and Barron's journey? Have you ever experienced the power of forgiveness and connection in your own life? Share your story in the comments below. And if this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that inspire and uplift. Together, we can create a ripple of kindness that changes the world.